Hey everyone, Brian B. with WestCoastSwingOnline.com, and I'm really excited to welcome you to our first ever West Coast Swing podcast. Our first guest is a guy named Forrest Outman. I met Forrest by chance on Facebook, and it turned out that he was a dance historian. So not only he's a professional dancer, and he's been dancing since the early 90s when he was really young, but he is a very rare dance historian, and he approaches his history from a very academic perspective. So after our conversation, which went about an hour long, he was really forthcoming to me saying, hey, if you need any resources for anything that I talked about, I can forward you resources and really back up what I'm saying. And so I thought that he was the perfect guy for this discussion. So we covered everything from the history of dancing pre-West Coast Swing, so the whole Lindy Hop craze and Charles Lindbergh, to the origins of the slot, the history of the anchor step. I actually pinned Forrest down to give me his four main influences on West Coast Swing, what he thought were the four key influences since the inception of the official adoption of the name West Coast Swing. So he talks us through all that, and then even a little bit based upon his historical knowledge of dancing, where West Coast Swing is going to go in the next 10 or 20 years, based on what he can predict from history. And he was a little hesitant to make those predictions, but man, a guy with as much knowledge as him, I just had to hear what he had to say. So I hope you guys enjoy this conversation even a little bit as much as I enjoyed having it with Forrest. So without further ado, I welcome you to the first West Coast Swing Online podcast. So this is kind of fun. It's the first time I've done this, and it was a complete off the cuff. So forgive me if I'm winging it as we go.
No worries.
Yeah, I mean, I came across you. I saw that, I guess it was the infographic that was being shared for West Coast Swing.
Mm-hmm.
And Stephen White was like, Forrest, is this valid? And I went, well, who? Stephen White's a bright guy. Like, who does he know that I don't know that will know if this is legit?
Yeah, I've known Steven for years and years, and he's been a friend of mine, so he knows what I do.
Yeah, sweet.
There's not many of us out there, so it's kind of like if you don't actually know somebody that knows a historian, you're probably not going to ever meet one.
Right. Well, I mean, hopefully I can use this to introduce people to you and, get some of what's in your brain out to the rest of us who are interested.
That's the idea. Don't want it to die with me,
Yeah, right. Well, you're young, so that's a good time. You got a ways to go. So, tell me about you, because I literally, other than doing a little homework online, I don't know anything about you. So tell me, a little bit about yourself.
All right, well, I guess I'll say I started dancing somewhere around 1990, 91. I'm not really sure. It was a long time ago, when I was in middle school. And then I danced for a few years. I didn't dance in high school. And then right at the end of high school, I started going out clubbing. As soon as I was 18, able to go out into nightclubs.
Sweet.
Right then, that's when the swing revival started. That was maybe, 97, end of 97. And so I started going out to the nightclubs, and then I was like, oh my gosh, they're partner dancing, right? So I can do this.
Yep.
That was awesome. I started doing that, but then I noticed immediately, because I was trained in international style ballroom as a kid, that of course I was doing something different than what they were doing.
Right.
So then I had to go, oh, okay, well, maybe I don't know everything. And then, a few months later, the first guy in our area came to learn the new Lindy Hop. And then I saw him doing that, and I was like, well, I could do that.
Sure, yeah.
Started picking up that, but that made me have to study. So look for external sources. This is in the beginning of swing revival, so nobody knew anything.
Right. Yeah, pre-internet, which is a huge
right. I mean, there was literally one guy.
Yep.
So
and a mythical VHS tape somewhere, right?
Exactly. Lots of VHS tapes. So I had to start looking for stuff, and then when I started looking for things, then I was finding other styles, right? So I'm looking for Lindy, but then when I look at Lindy, because I'm looking for swing stuff, I'm like, oh, what's this Shag thing?
Right.
What's this West Coast? Because I hadn't been exposed to it. So I started studying all of the different things because I didn't like being ignorant. So anything I could get my hands on, basically, from St. Louis. I went from like a jive kid to studying Lindy Hop, Balboa, Shag, West Coast Swing, Carolina Shag, and Lindy Hop, like in a year.
Like, what drove that? What was the What
I
was
don't
this?
like being ignorant. Yeah, it's just I don't like saying I don't know. So
that's
I
that's
don't know.
hilarious.
So, so yeah, I started studying all that stuff, and I loved all of it because all of it's different, and that started me studying. And around that same time is when I started teaching. In, I think the end of 1998, I got pulled into Arthur Murray Dance Studios
Right.
because they saw me dancing and were like, "This kid can dance." So they pulled me in, and I guess that's actually where I got exposure to, say, hustle.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fun thing, the thing that kind of got me in history, if you will, was besides just learning that the other styles existed, but history specifically, was finding old dance manuals, like in the back, dusty dance manuals.
That's cool. I just bought one of those old style flip books where you like flip the
Oh yeah,
pages.
the cigarette books,
Yeah,
yeah.
man, I found one of those on Amazon. I was so psyched. It was like 99 cents, and if
Yeah,
they had 100 of
that's a
them, I
deal,
would have
buddy.
bought.
You buy that, 99 cents. Those are not usually cheap.
That's awesome.
You got a deal. So anyway, I got that, and I saw the different styles like hustle. I was like, what's this Latin hustle thing? Because they weren't teaching that anymore.
Right.
So I saw that, and it was completely different. And then that made me start to think. So then I started collecting books for my own edification, just to be a good teacher and not be ignorant.
Right. Right.
And as I learned more, I kept collecting. And then I guess the next big phase was I met a dance historian via my research, just studying for my own. I met a original shag dancer from the 30s, Betty Wood Henderson.
Oh, super cool.
So I was at the time learning about Big Apple and shag, and found out that this lady who was one of the original Big Apple dancers was still alive. So I tracked her down, and after one conversation with her, she was like, "Oh my God, you need to meet my friend Lance. Lance Benishek. He's a historian out of Minneapolis, Minnesota." So she gave me his contact info, and I called him, and we were instantly like peas and carrots. And that's, I don't know, that's well over maybe 14, 15 years ago.
Oh, wow. That's
So that changed things because now I had a collaborator in research, somebody kind of to mentor me.
right.
And I kept on just kind of researching on my own, dancing, teaching dancing. And then I guess next thing was college. I went to college. I was going to go for education degree.
And this is all happening, and you're how old?
By that time I was mid-20s.
Okay.
Yeah, this is over the course of many years, from like 18 to 25 here. And then, so I went back to college, and I had to do write papers or whatever. And they said, well, write about something you're interested in.
Bingo.
This is Comp 2. So I thought, well, I always wanted to know if the story about Foxtrot being invented by Harry Fox is true or not, because it didn't make any sense to me. Because he was a famous vaudevillian, and if you're famous and you invent a dance that's the most famous dance in America, you'd think you'd want to put your name on it and put it in the press and be like, yeah, I kind of did that.
Right.
That's not in the print. So that didn't add up for me. So then I decided, well, I'll write about that and see if I can figure it out, because we're supposed to do a research paper. So end of the semester came, time to put in our term paper, and she says beforehand, she says, I need to see your sources, and you need to print them out and give them to me, turn them in so I can review and make sure they're credible. I said, do I have to print them out? She said, yeah, you have to print them out and hand them to me. I said, I don't think I can print them out. She said, what do you mean you can't print them out? I said, I've got about 2,500.
You're
She
a
looked at
straight
me
up
like
nerd.
crazy. I said, can I just show you my laptop? So, yeah, that's what happened. So she looked at him, and she said, this isn't a term paper. You wrote a thesis, Forrest. So she said, you should probably keep doing that. And that's when I realized that I had a knack for digging, I guess, beyond normal levels. And
I would say so.
yeah, and then I spoke to, after that, I talked to history professors and things about it, and they were like, yeah, you do that. That's what you should do. So that's how I went from the transition of taking it as like a fun hobby to like, okay, I'm actually adding valid research, and I need to pursue that.
So although like you're an official professional dancer and an amateur historian, if you will, you kind of approached it from a what's the word? In a more official perspective.
Academic. I use academic research.
Yeah, that was it. That was the word I was searching for.
Secondary sources. I stick to academic methodology when I do research. The only reason that you don't go through colleges is because the only thing I'm going to do is write papers that nobody reads except for in conferences.
Right.
And actually, nobody supports social dancing anymore in colleges. It's a terrible thing, but it's true. They just write about things like Martha Graham.
Right.
Yeah. And, we don't really need another paper on ballet. It's so bad they're writing about niches, and social dancing is literally dying by the day as far as history is concerned. Because there's like a dozen of us historians in the world.
Well, and that's why, if I can like hop in and introduce myself a little bit back, I've never been a huge dance historian, and I never had the drive to like research things like you. But what was fascinating for me was to see how the internet started to change how people learned about dancing, and how dances that would have never pushed in certain areas because there was the one guy who knew something, who knew a person, who had a VHS tape. Like, once YouTube came out, that fascinated me. So now I'm like, well, how can we use, through a website I'm building, how can I use technology to connect all these dots? And I think that a lot of the dance world is still stuck backwards. We've got the internet and we can do this Skype call, and I've never met you, and yet we can have this conversation. I would have never known you existed if it wasn't for Facebook and a weird random common friend.
Right.
So that's my kind of passion now, is to use modern technology to connect the dots, to bring all this stuff back, because it's frustrating to go, and the whole point of this for me is like the history of West Coast swing, and it's the same junk we're cobbling together from each other's websites. That's
yes,
garbage, and that's all we can do, right? Like,
amen.
So yeah.
I understand. I mean, that's the best you got. If 50 people stand up and say this is what happened, you're going to go, well, that's probably what happened. Unfortunately, that's not exactly academic level research.
Right. But it is the best guess we have.
It is the best guess. And a lot of the times, it's not really off. It's just missing pieces and filled in a little bit off. So right. A lot of it's actually not the history that I read online isn't entirely off. Some is, but mostly dates. Maybe the order of events is a little off. Little things, maybe they don't understand the little caveats of an evolution, but it's not that things are wrong. It's kind of like playing the game telephone. Things get distorted. Absolutely. And they get passed on.
Yeah.
I don't blame people for that.
So, let's talk about West Coast swing. I mean, let me ask you, what's your relationship to it now? Like, what do you teach it? Do you?
Yeah, I dance. I teach. I go out to the dances here local.
And local for you is
Tampa Bay, Florida.
Okay.
Tampa represent.
Cool area. I like it. I spent a little bit of time in Clearwater. My brother used to live there.
Hugo and Stacy. I go out to their dances.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I don't think they were around when I was down there. It was like 2001, 2002, 9/11. I was in that area when 9/11 hit.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, right.
So let's see. West Coast swing. I dance. I teach. I started dancing that right around the same time, maybe 1999 or so. Yeah. At the time, I was the only young person in the Bay Area that did it. Thankfully, there's a lot of young people now.
Right.
Things have exploded in West Coast in the last 20 years.
Amen, YouTube.
Yeah, it's great. As far as do you want me to get into the history stuff?
Yeah, let's. And you this stuff, so you have a map laid out in your head. So you talk, I'll listen.
Well, let me just start with it's simple in that it evolved from Lindy Hop. Okay. That's empirical. There's really no point in arguing it. Sorry if I roll my eyes, but I hear people say that all the time, and I'm like, oh, face palm. It originated from Lindy Hop. It really started with.
And what's the face palm at?
People that argue that Lindy Hop and West Coast swing aren't related, it's ludicrous.
Okay.
Yeah, to take a few minutes of actual research and reading old books to figure that one out. So anyway, basically it starts with, if you will, Dean Collins, honestly. Dean Collins coming out to California in the late 30s. And he brought with him Lindy Hop, and his particular style, was done by the white dancers in New York. And you can see dancers, if you want to reference that, you can see dancers in the Harvest Moon Ball footage from the period. You can see other white couples that dance very similar to him in that footage. But he was the first one that came out to LA. At the time, they weren't doing that. So if you look at, say, we call it the beach clip, it's a competition promo footage from 1938 on Venice Beach. You'll see that they're doing a completely different style of dancing. They had no Lindy Hop, really, at the time. But Dean was there, and as soon as his style started to catch on of doing Lindy Hop, it changed the scene in California.
And so, when you say, one of the things in this conversation I kind of want to paint for people is a picture in our brains. So when, nowadays, if you start dancing in the last 10 years, everything again is so influenced by YouTube and you can see everything. So when we say Dean Collins, he went from New York to California, and
yes,
right, like, what does that look like? Like, does he ride across on a horse? Does he go over there to teach at a studio? Does he just go out social dancing? Is he teaching his friends on the back deck?
Okay. His goal was to get into film and such, get a big break for his dancing and such. So he wanted to go out there and make a name for himself, and he did. He was in tons of films and things. It worked. So he got out there and started winning competitions, getting a reputation for being a great dancer, and got in a lot of films. Even choreographed for films.
So there was a promotional campaign for himself, in essence.
Absolutely. He figured he'd go out there. I mean, there's a lot of Lindy Hop in New York, but LA, he was the first top dog out there, first competitive level Lindy Hopper to reside there.
That's fascinating. So that, like, in our current culture, that is someone being proficient at a particular style and moving to a big market that doesn't have a top professional.
Exactly. Genius, okay. Right?
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at. Like, what does it look like then? Because a lot of us who dance now and are professionals now kind of know how it works in the last 10 or 20 years, but what did it look like, 70, 80 years ago?
Well, dancing then, I mean, that was boomtown. If you think about the 30s and the swing era, it really was an explosion in the art of swing and such, and people were just starting to get it into film and such. I mean, the term swing kind of caught on in 36. So he was capitalizing on that momentum. It was kind of like the swing revival, people that jumped in on the bandwagon then, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's exploding. It's all over the place, in the news, the jitterbugs, everything. So he was using that momentum and was smart enough to realize, hey, I need to go out there and do something with it now, and he did.
And so that was, in essence, bringing Lindy Hop to the West Coast.
Absolutely.
Cool. And so how does Lindy Hop make its way through the community? I mean, obviously television. And again, if I can make the parallel to things that we can understand today, like the Dancing with the Stars era and all the stuff on TV, of course, makes it much more common. And, 12 years ago, no one knew what tango was, and now everyone has an opinion on an Argentine tango. So how does West Coast swing make its path from, or how does Lindy Hop make its path when it's in the West Coast and morph itself into West Coast swing? What does that path look like?
Okay,
and how long, how much time does that take?
That's a long time. Evolution is a pretty slow process.
Sure.
And it's when new things get brought in, new ideas, new concepts, that they merge. And the story of evolution is really a story of hybridization, if you will, or fusion.
Right.
Because people see other things and they're influenced by them, and they merge them with their own systems. They're like, that's a cool idea. I like that. Of course, who isn't going to do that? That's common sense to me. And so they do. They start to fold things in. Or maybe they have training in one style of dancing, and then they learn another style, so it's natural for them to hybridize.
And let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question on that, because one of the things that I always sort of talk about and that I've realized is you can't stop that progression. As much as we all want to hold tight to the old guard, I came to a realization in everything we do, good luck, because you're not going to stop it. So absolutely. I understand preserving it, and I dig this. And I mean, I've danced 20 years now, so I want to hold tight to the things that I learned in the beginning because it's what I'm good at. But, man, I also think that there's huge value in staying open to the fact that it's going to change, and you better be okay with that. So, talk to me, or talk to the people who would say that, we got to hold everything tight to the way it used to be, otherwise it's going to die. Tell me about just dancing in general and how that does or doesn't happen.
It's a very, very valid question and good point, and something that, my opinion over the years changed on as well. being a historian, of course, I'm passionate about preserving and documenting what was, but I don't think I should stop the tide of change either. If anything, I feel like our past can enrich our future. I've learned from our past. To me, I don't want to make it die. I want to keep those ideas and concepts. Kind of, if you've been dancing that long, then you can remember, say, Mario Rabau's influence on West Coast swing and use of push and whip in the complex rap patterns that brought from the country and western circuit crossover, which, prior to that, it didn't exist, if you will. And
right.
It's a huge thing, and I think that's important. And there's still stuff even that we used to do that isn't quite the same today. So you can even, at a certain point, kind of things fall off, and they can be brought back into the fold if they're preserved.
That's great. And I want to jump a little bit back to the West Coast getting its name and that progression. But you mentioned country western and swing, and of course I have a ballroom, country, and swing background, and I've done them all since the late 90s. So talk to me about the relationship of country and swing, or swing and country, or how those two...
That's a great one, and I went ahead and I grabbed something from my collection here for you.
Look at you go.
This is the original Arthur Murray 1957 Loré Howe manual.
Okay.
Got both editions.
57, you said?
Yeah, this is 57. This is the first printed one.
Okay.
Before that, it's a teletype that I actually got access to from Lance Benishek, again, my friend collaborator.
Right.
He has the 1949 teletype. He also has the earlier Arthur Murray National Syllabi, the very first one, and the teletype one from 49 is the second generation. That is the one that had the first instance of Western swing in it. So it was called Western swing. It wasn't called West Coast swing.
Right. I call it Western swing in my studio all the time.
So, but one of the things that's important in that you can, if you have this book, you would quickly just read it and it would clear that all up, is they were using as a regional descriptor, meaning movement biases, or what they perceived as movement biases on the west coast of the U.S. versus the eastern coast of the U.S.
Okay.
So they perceived dancing on the west coast as starting with the progressive walks, or using a progressive movement versus a ball change backwards, or rock step, if you will, backwards.
Okay. So the difference of I don't know. Give me a clear difference than people, if they started dancing in the last 5 or 6 years, would know. Like this dance versus West Coast swing, obviously walk progressing versus. Right. This is
the biggest description difference between the two, and she's also the person that introduced the term coaster step.
Okay.
Though it's a bit of a misnomer now as far as how people understand what that meant. People think it is a pattern, like a back together forward.
That's I would. Okay.
Not what it meant. So what it meant is to start in a coasting action, to start progressing. So instead of having a hard movement at the very end, so if I start in a breakaway, open position, starting on the equivalent of your 7 and 8, if you will, 7 and 8, 1, 2. That's what a coaster was to begin the motion.
Okay.
So what we call maybe an anchor now was a coaster then.
Okay. And it was designed to purposely keep it from being like, what's the word? Give me a word. Harsh in the direction change.
Right, or not necessarily in the direction change. Yeah, of course you don't want it harsh, but the idea of creating a connection before moving.
Okay.
Describe it. So that was the concept, and it wasn't a single pattern. Again, I'll feel free to share this with you guys as far as the actual documentation. You can see there were multiple descriptions of different ways, just like you can do, say, a tap step, a step tap, a triplet. You can do different movements. You can change the positioning of your feet and such during that anchor, if you will. That all existed back then, too.
And so does that, and forgive me if I get ignorant because I don't know anything about this history. Again, I've just cobbled together whatever my brain can remember. But when Skippy Blair talks about an anchor step not specifically being a step, but being like two centers pulled away, is that what you're getting at? So we could use all these different words, coaster, anchor, or whatever else. Exactly. But it's really just a term to describe the same thing.
Right. And the term anchor really, to me, is an adaptation for teaching in order to get people to realize that they don't move forward as far as center of mass goes.
Okay.
They stay anchored or back-weighted, if you will,
And
through the action to allow connection so that he can move you forward when he desires it, rather than running at the guy.
interesting. And so, like, the coaster step was the modern day version of doing that. The back together forward, let's change that. The back together forward was the modern day of doing it at one point.
Yeah, that is one of the things, one of the versions of a coaster step is described. It's just somewhere along the line, that term got associated specifically with that motion.
The back together forward.
Right, kind of like how people have turned a ball change into a rock step. It's a misnomer now. But again, that's very hard to change that tide.
Right. Okay, so let's jump back to California, and West Coast swing is starting to take on its own personality from Lindy, I assume.
Yeah, like the old timers, a good example would be Hal Tackier said, he said, "I do the Lindy, not the hop." So he was describing what he saw when he first saw black dancers from the Savoy and such. They bounced a lot and they danced a more smooth style on the West Coast of the U.S. comparatively. That was the norm, you could say, whereas only some people in New York would dance that way.
Okay, so and if I can say this, because I had an interesting conversation with my friend Lee Easton, and he and I kind of grew up together as dancers, and he lives in the UK. And he has a line dance and a country and a swing background, and him and his girlfriend Fabienne have been really pushing West Coast swing out there. And so he was in Kentucky teaching about a month ago, and he was talking about how differently West Coast is progressing in Europe versus America, because they still come over here several times a year to the West Coast, and they, of course, started a lot of their competition stuff in the UCWDC circuit here. And it was interesting to hear because the dancing was able to progress so fast because of the internet, right? And there were still teachers going over there, and they'd come and do workshops and everything, but there was so much information that they were able to progress so fast. And he said it's a completely different style of West Coast swing. And I don't even want to dig into what was said because I don't remember the specifics of it, but I thought how interesting, they're on the other side of an ocean. Very few of them come here. Very few of the hardcore West Coast swing dancers get there, relatively speaking. But yet, because of the internet, there's this huge exchange of information, and that they're developing a dance, the same dance, a lot like your East Coast and West Coast, versions of the dance.
That is a great analogy for it. What happened then?
Yeah, right here under our eyes, and it's like going back to you can't stop it. It's just, I guess, history is telling us that's just part of the process. It's just part of the process.
Same thing with the hustle culture in Europe. They're called disco fox. It's hustle in Europe. It's evolved completely differently than in America. There's some crossover because they have the same origins, if you will, but because they're separated by an ocean. And that ocean back then, of course, was the East and the West of the U.S. Yeah, right. And at the beginning, it was very similar. And as time goes on, it diverges more and more, obviously, because they're not calling each other up and asking each other for permission on how to do their steps.
Right. Yeah, just look it up, and now you're looking it up from the guy who's doing it differently, and you don't know it's different. You just think it's cool.
Right.
So, like, does the story ring true about how West Coast swing gained its name and Skippy Blair and?
Yeah, I actually believe Skippy's story about the term West Coast swing versus Western swing. The first source I have for that is 1959, which correlates well with that timetable. Basically, the idea that at that time, a musical style had also come out known as Western swing, what we now might call rockabilly.
Okay.
So a lot of people call it rockabilly, but Western swing basically was really upbeat country and Western music, that almost fusion, if you will, of country and rock, early rock and roll. And that style of music already existed, but as that gained notoriety and namesake, that's when it started to cause a little bit of an issue because people thought that the dance now was associated with that. So I think it was a savvy move to change the name to avoid that confusion of association with country and Western. Because prior to that, like I think in 44 or so, is when they changed the name from hillbilly music on the Billboard charts to country and Western.
Okay.
So
thank God. I would not want to be a hillbilly dancer.
Yeah.
Country's bad enough. Hillbilly's worse. No offense to the
Yeah, it
hillbillies
used to
of
be
the
called
world.
race music, and then they changed it to R&B, so it didn't sound racist. And the same thing, hillbilly music. So again, it didn't sound so terrible to country and western. And so after these changes, the slang terminology and associations had to change as well, which is a common thing, kind of like jitterbug and jive and shag and all these kind of slang terms really kind of got associated with dances and such. And that can cause a little bit of problems with people understanding what those things meant, that they weren't really hard and fast, but they were more general slang terms.
Okay. And so that basically Western swing into West Coast swing was like a branding play.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. What Skippy says makes perfect sense.
That's super cool. And so how long does this, so it becomes West Coast swing by name, and in what year, roughly?
Well, the earliest source I have for that is 1959. As far as the Golden State Teachers Association, Skippy Blair said that was in 1962 when it was officially recognized by the band of teachers in the area, if you will, that were promoting it. That name change happening in 62 officially. But again, it was obviously thrown around before they decided, well, let's just adopt that name.
That makes sense. It takes a while to cobble together everyone to
Right.
agree.
Like one person is to say, we should all change the name today. And everyone's like, okay.
Right. It's a slow process.
Yeah.
And so what does West Coast look like? Now let's talk decade by decade and some like basic influences. Like what influences West Coast in like the 60s and then the 70s and...
There is one thing I want to give a little quick shout out.
Yeah, please do.
If you will. Actually, I heard something not too long ago that was news to me, and it was really great, and it's from Benji Schwimmer. Benji Schwimmer talking about the term slotting and the origin of the term slotting. And that was a really great one because...
Oh, that's a good subject. Great. I'm glad you brought this up.
So, right. His story basically is that a particular dance venue required everybody to dance in, if you will, in a track. And they referred to that track as the slot. And that track required the dancers to dance in a slotted manner. And again, because of the association with calling it the slot, that's where that name comes from. And also helps explain why it went from, yes, we had slotting, and it even had it out in New York as well, I mean, just for crowd control. But the idea that once you don't have to worry about crowd control, that you still keep it slotted. This is, to me, the real innovation, because slotting happened in New York as well. I'm sure many other places, as far as being in a crowd and having to navigate, because it's pretty common sense to do that.
Right.
But the idea that when there isn't a crowd, that we still keep that movement.
Yeah.
Therein, I think, is when we start to say that we have a truly unique evolution happening, and that's directly related to a generation of dancers, if you will, learning only with a slot.
So it's like, you ever hear the story, the bear in the cage? The bear gets up every day, he walks 10 feet to the other side of the cage, eats, walks 10 feet back, and lays down. And he does this day after day. And then one day they take the cage off, and the bear still gets up, he walks 10 feet over, eats the food, and leaves. Then they move the food 20 feet away, the bear walks 10 feet and he stops. So he's become trained to only walk that 10 feet. So basically the dancers train themselves to stay in that slot, and then even if I'm all by myself in an entire ballroom, I stay in my slot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, usually common sense prevails when it comes to history.
That's funny.
Yeah, my grandmother's a great dancer, and she... whenever I talk to her about history, a lot of the times she has those moments where she's like, Forrest, come on, think about it. Yeah, that's kind of common sense.
You're getting too crazy, Forrest. You are crazy, which is a good thing. You got to be a little nuts to go down these rabbit holes as deep as you have. So,
yeah, it takes a special kind of crazy.
It does. I appreciate it. So what goes on in like the 60s, 70s? Are there any major influences, or does one of the decades in that time period stand out more than another?
There is a little bit of crossover here when we talk about, say, early country and western music and such, and R&B and such. The musical landscape was changing, and the dancing was changing through the late 50s and such, really with the influence of these new styles and into the 60s. the story of evolution really parallels the story of music. So we have to take those hand in hand and look at them as being one and the same. The music, as the music slows down and starts to have no longer the trumpets as the main influence in jazz music and such,
Okay.
It lends itself to a more melodic, if you will, movement, or less bang. I don't know.
Okay. Smoother, if you will.
Smoother, right, smoother. So smoother music means smoother dancing. Slower tempo ranges change the dance dynamics, because you don't need power, you don't need to pike as much, there doesn't need to be much counterbalance because you're not throwing as much velocity out, right?
Right. Like
You
if you
have to dig in, of course, if you're dancing with power.
yeah, if you watch the US Open videos from the 90s versus versus a lot of what you end up seeing today, or even some of the slower acoustical style music, the dance looks completely different than the rappy, turny, rapid fire, 150 mile an hour, 150 beats a minute, US Open videos you see from the 90s.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you can see that happening there. I mean, the legato style dancing that we see today, that's based much more on emotional content and such, rather than rhythmic based dancing, is within our dance careers you can see evidence of that. And that same parallel happened, if you will, then smoothing out of the dancing with the changing of the music. Also, I'd say that another, if I can jump there a little bit,
Please do.
the dance smoothing out a little bit and becoming less acrobatic, but also a major influence to me, a really big influence, is to talk about the disco era.
Go for it.
So hustle and the disco era, say like if we want to talk about Buddy Schwimmer. Buddy Schwimmer was also a hustle champion.
Okay.
Also, let's say Michael Kim, hustle champion as well. Hell of a good hustle dancer. So these things coexisted. And of course, naturally you had crossover. You also have the emergence of the mambo craze and such. And all of these emergence of systems, if you will, all come together. Especially in the 70s is when you see Latin hustle. If you learn Latin hustle, it is very similar, if you will, to West Coast swing. A lot of pros even that knew the West Coast style of swing when they first experienced Latin hustle were like, well, that just feels like West Coast.
Huh, interesting.
Because it uses a tap step, back together, forward, 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 walk bass, kind of more like Carolina Shag, if you will.
Yeah, okay, I understand.
But back and forth rather than the woman moving with you, though that was possible as well. But they also brought in a different kind of fluidity to it, to the dancing, rather than the Lindy mentality, if you will, straight Lindy. Now we had a learning how to catch the woman in motion, redirect momentum and such in a very fluid way.
What you would say is, if I might jump in, is that like really what's going on with a lot of people today?
Mm-hmm.
That it's very fluid, and they're keeping the momentum going, and there's a stretchy, long,
absolutely
legato kind of feel to it.
That's been a trend for years and years. I think you see, ever since say Robert Cordova and Deborah Seike in the late 90s, and Jordan and Tatiana started, bringing in the more legato style, the more melodic-based movement and such. Specifically, Jordan and Tatiana, when they started bringing in that zouk-based movement, that's a game changer.
Yes. So let's hop into like, what do you think? I mean, end of an era, right? Like Jordan and Tatiana, the winningest couple. From my perspective, there's very few people that in one of my old coaches said, Brian, I've never seen a champion cloned. You know what I mean? It almost is like the story of this discussion where you have to go out ahead of the pack to figure out what's next. And I guess understanding history probably teaches you that more than anything. But talk about like their influence. Because I see them and the YouTube era together as being a huge influence to people. So talk about their influence on the dance and what they brought to it.
Well, specifically,
Talk about zouk for those of us who don't know, or just sort of know. It's like, oh yeah, it's zouk. We like.
All right. So
we don't
yes,
know.
sorry. Sometimes I throw out words, and you might not know what I'm talking about. Zouk is the evolution of lambada, which is in turn an evolution of samba from Brazil. And the lambada craze in the 80s, very short-lived, but at the time, the lambada music.
Is that the forbidden dance lambada? Is that the?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
I know this. All right. Yep.
But at the time, in the 80s, there was a new style of music coming out of the French Antilles, which was the first music to use synthesizers and such.
Yeah, okay.
Electronic music from the French Antilles, yes?
Terrible time of music.
Saint Martin. Anyway, so this new style of music called zouk, they started dancing to it because it has still a syncopated 2/4 bass structure, which is what you would dance a samba to.
Yeah, okay.
So the Brazilians liked this music for dancing to. And in that music, as it evolved into two styles primarily, called like a zouk dance music, which is a little faster, more syncopated, stronger beat accents, and what they call zouk love, which is their ballad version. Most people dance to what's called zouk love style, and it took that dance, which was very high energy, zouk, and made it a much more melodic, sensual dance over the years. And that's what you're seeing when you see Jordan and Tatiana dancing, is they're using this very curved style that uses a lot of shaping through the movements.
Yep.
Head shaping and such specifically. You see that those off-axis rotations and things that are beautiful and very difficult.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I go, man, be inspired by that, but that's not easy to emulate. Like,
oh no, the trick is to make it look easy.
Yeah, spinning with your body aligned is far easier than doing what they do.
Yeah, no, I remember the first time I met Tatiana Molman in maybe, I don't know, maybe 2000. I think it was 2000. I think the first time I ever met her. And she was at Memories in Los Angeles, and I remember distinctly when she wasn't dancing with us guys, she was just working on her pirouettes by herself.
I have a very similar story of one of the times that I met her. Yeah, for sure. Same stuff. And I saw her do something crazy, and she's like, she goes, I don't do it all technical like you, Brian, with good posture and everything. And then she does something that I couldn't even imagine doing. Yeah, freak of nature for sure. Her
Seke brought in those beautiful turns into the dance. The higher level, really control.
And so, what do you think will use your history and your knowledge and give me a prediction about where, what does the next 20 years hold? Obviously we're not going to be able to say, well, this couple will travel to this country and get this influence, but if I want to be the next Jordan Tatiana, right? If I want to be the next influencer swinger, or when that next couple comes along that gives something to a generation, what does that couple end up having to do? What does that look like?
That's a better framing. I think that's a good thing. I'm going to throw out something my aunt says to me. She says, just be you. Everybody else is already taken.
Yeah, my students say that. That's why we get along for it.
I think that, it's that idea of following what you love. Don't be afraid to try new things. Everybody does that. That everybody's, taking a little something from here and there. And that's the nature of evolution. The music is changing, right? We're adapting to the new musical trends and such. Dubstep didn't exist, does now, right?
Right.
So we have different influences now that are influencing the way we move, because there's things that we're hearing now. Even if you will, the changes in rap music, right? How the flow has changed now. 80s rap was, everything went like this when you rapped.
Right.
Snoop Dogg comes around and he just starts flowing when he's rapping and talking, and that's how it goes. But that's changed everything. Good God, I'm a terrible rapper.
It was a better attempt.
The idea, though, this melodic-based rapping and such changed everything. Wait a second.
Yep.
I gotta plug in. Hold on, I'm gonna lose you.
Oh, please do. Tech Monday. This is a fascinating conversation. This is for those of you guys who listen to this straight through while Forrest is plugging in. Yeah, I had no idea it was going to get this deep and this cool, and this guy is seriously legit.
So here we go.
There he is. He's back.
And good to go.
Bang.
All right. So as far as the changes go, and that's hard to say because new styles are emerging and they're changing. Like I follow emerging trends as well. Look at Kazamba. Didn't exist. Now it exists.
Right.
Always new things are going to evolve, and those are going to create new things. Or maybe even look at Argentine tango. The fact that people are using techniques and such from Argentine tango and crossing over elements.
All over the place, yeah, for sure.
Of course. So it's hard to say, but the thing that's going to happen without doubt is there will be more fusion. Good luck holding back the tide of change, like you said.
Yep, I completely agree.
Don't be afraid of it. Those of us that have been dancing a long time, we just get new toys, man. It keeps it fresh. Look at it that way. Preserve the old, teach it to the next generation, but at the same time, learn some new stuff. Keep it fresh for yourself.
Yeah, that's good advice. I wish we could. It's hard. Because people are going to watch this, and I kind of want them to hear this story. Like, a lot of times when people build their entire reputations on, let's say, a scientist who builds a reputation on something, and then some new research comes out to refute that. Well, now the real world issue is this guy works for a major university. He's made his career on what he knew, and it was the best information he had at the time. And now he's 55 years old. He's got a life. He's got bills, and his knowledge is outdated. And, one of two things happens. I think that guy either, no longer is the expert because there's new information out there. He doesn't hold the same spot that he did. Or they vehemently defend that information because they have to, because that's how they make their living. And I think that that's probably a little bit true in our industry as we get comfortable knowing what we know, and we don't want to allow the next phase to come in because we're experts at what we're experts at. And if you don't stay learning and current, that becomes a little bit worn off. And it's a difficult prospect because I don't want to lose the luster of being the teacher that I am or have been, right? And so I think that same thing happens a little bit in dancing. So for those dance teachers who are out there, I want you to keep that in mind. There's my 2 cents.
I think that's absolutely valid. And I also think that as far as the perspective of somebody out there who's dancing, say, it's sometimes very brutal to watch ballroom dancers butcher West Coast swing because they're doing West swing from the 70s. And you're like, exactly it kind of changed a bit.
Yeah. And it's fascinating to me because respect to those people huge respect to those people who are in the game for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. It takes a long time to become an expert at anything. And so the dance teachers who've been around an incredible amount of time, there's always stuff to be learned from them. But what I sort of find in a lot of cases is it's the historical perspective and the philosophy that becomes most important to me from a lot of the dancers who've been around the longest time. I love listening to Ray Rivers.
I think we can have both. I don't think it really should be a battle about this or that way, history and controlling it, because that's a worthless battle, or going the other route and ignoring history because you're losing information. It's kind of like when we go so far, we've forgotten where we came from. So it's kind of like a movie that you haven't watched in 10 years. You're watching it again for the first time. Yeah. Right? So the same goes with dancing. At a certain point, we can actually learn from the past because we've forgotten it. So I think it's good that we have old guard, and I think that they actually have valid things to teach and support them. But we can understand them for what they are and respect them for what they are and take from that and just put it into the fold instead of throwing it out. Why throw away information? Just acquire it. And at the same time, don't be afraid to evolve as well.
That's a killer perspective. That should be on that should be on an internet, what's the word? I don't know, that should be a blog post in and of itself.
They're the shoulders we stand upon, so we should respect them.
Yeah, no, for sure. I completely agree. Man, that's most of the questions I had. Let me ask you one more question, go back in the history. So give me the brief synopsis, like pre-Lindy Hop. What is like, how does, again, I focus this on West Coast swing, and I'm sure you could go deep for hours and hours and hours, but what does the quick progression from anchor it to something else that might be in the
Okay.
comment
Well,
culture.
if you will, really, when you talk about pre-Lindy Hop, okay, so Lindy Hop, 1927, that's when, of course, Charles Lindbergh made his historic flight. So it didn't exist before then. 2 weeks later in the newspapers, you immediately see Lindbergh Hop, as far as it being adopted in such as a term. The real change, if you will, that changed the game from what was, they already had many styles of collegiate, which is what most people might consider it almost like shag dancing, old style shag, hopping and kicking and such, shuffling the feet. It would, if you saw me dancing it, you would probably think of it as some form of swing, right? Maybe like Balboa, if you will. But that dancing was primarily closed position dancing at the time. Shorty George Snowden, in 1928, he was in a dance marathon and he started doing breakaways. He did one, he lost his partner into a breakaway where they broke away from each other, right, as doing a turn, yeah? And he got a reaction from the crowd. He played it off like he meant to do it, and he got a reaction from the crowd. And so he kept on doing it. So this was the first time, while breaking away or dancing hand to hand or an open position had been done before, all the way back to like the Texas Tommy and such from ragtime era, this was the first time that it became that innovation, this idea of making that the base form of constantly breaking away. That's the game changer. The idea that we're going to stay here, we're going to use this constantly, not as a move thrown in once in a blue moon, but this is going to be the move. Like that was really Shorty George Snowden's innovation, and in a sense, you could say that created the Lindy Hop of as we know it today. That just took years to smooth out and elongate into what we would see it as today.
So you're talking like the difference between, because sometimes when I talk about, the stretch and the openness and the freedom of West Coast swing, I say if they didn't intend for it to be that way, and then I put the person in closed position, I lead a sugar push. So you're talking about like the difference between, again, framing it in West Coast today analogy, like if I'm dancing all my patterns in closed position, that's very traditional, versus I go down to a one-hand open swing hold, and now it's a completely different ball game.
Right, that allowed independent footwork.
Right.
That changed everything. Now we had individual interpretation. He was throwing in kicks, getting up on his heels and things. He was allowed, and she was allowed to start doing new things, like what we call swivels today, right, or switches, what have you. The sugar foot comes from Twist Mouth George, 1934 in Harlem, because he thought it looked better. The girls looked more feminine instead of doing ball changes backwards.
Right. That's so fascinating. And so we go back to Lindy Hop, and what's before that? What are
the collegiate dances? A lot of people talk about Charleston, but other things existed at the time. You had varsity drag. You had different styles of drags, and if you will, the dance and the drags aren't what you might think of as drag blues. That meant a slow drag. Okay, blues was considered the slowest spectrum of music back then. It was slower than slow foxtrot, is what you would call blues, as a dance teacher terminology. But there was also drag styles done to medium and faster tempo music as well, which had quite a different aesthetic to them. What today we would, again, most people would probably think it looked like collegiate shag, if I had to use the word. But aesthetically more like Connie Weidel, if you YouTube that one, guys, how he danced in a larger open frame. But you had those, you had other styles like Jersey hop. There's many hop styles. Of course, you had shag. Shag dates from the 20s as well.
And all these dances that we just ran through, those are like swing dances, precursors to Lindy Hop.
Right. You had, St. Louis Hop was 27 as well. You had Finale Hop. You had Scandal Walk. There's a lot of different dances that existed before that period that we collectively call the Collegiate Era, because that's really when dancing became a youth thing and wild and crazy, if you will, which evolved into swing.
And again, it's probably very regional at that point because the exchange of travel and information isn't what we know today.
More regional. There's still crossover because we still had national dance master unions that brought things coast to coast.
Okay.
So they had national conventions and regional conventions.
But is it safe to say more so than it would be today because we can...
much more so. The homogenization in dance culture today due to the internet is something that's never existed before.
Yeah, that's an interesting statement that it's never been, I can never look up. You just rattle off something and I can go look up a video about it right now and teach myself in my office.
Right. Like if you want to know how they're doing hustle in Europe now, because you heard me talk about Disco Fox, you can go and YouTube it. And now you can learn how to dance like they're dancing in Europe instead of like America. That couldn't exist without traveling to Europe and spending months there before.
Right. Yeah, like the old school, like all my old school ballroom people. I mean, the Bad Mama Jamas, they all had to like go over to Europe and stay in England for a month at a time. And if you weren't that person, that's the only information you would have.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The first person to teach international style and get certified in is a guy named Fred Rust. Still alive, lives down in Sarasota, a little south of me. And he taught the first American U.S. champion, Larry Silvers, in the 60s. And Fred was the first guy certified by the Imperial Society of Teachers of Dancing that was an American, because that's in the 50s. So there really was not a whole lot of crossover. Obviously, there's an ocean separating us.
Right.
So it's very hard to get the information. The only way he lived in New York. Anytime sailors came over from port or whatever, from England, he would snatch them up and say, hey, teach me some stuff.
That's crazy. Oh, and now we can YouTube it. And Skype chat.
So we got it easy. We're living the golden era of education.
Would you say we can make that a quote? Like, this is the golden era of education for West Coast.
Yeah,
for dancing and dancing, period.
Oh, absolutely. And you've been dancing a long time, too. I mean, we used to have, like, VHS parties where we would get together and all huddle up over super uber-duper overpriced VHS video, and slow-mo it and go back and forth and try copying it again and again.
I have them to the right of me sitting, like, there's a whole bottom shelf of a bookcase, and it's all, the whole bottom piece is VHS tapes, and then there's some DVDs up there, and most of the DVDs are copied from the one overly priced, I got the US Open DVD, and everyone would be copying the same, like, 5 routines.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it used to work. So now, you can just choose, I don't know, which pro do I want to emulate today or learn something from today? Click.
Yeah, that's incredible. From the official part, I want to thank you for your time for doing this, and I don't exactly know what I'm going to do with this is the first time I've actually done a Skype interview, if you will. Ideas fly through my mind. I'm really kind of personally passionate about cobbling together some stuff and using technology today for West Coast Swing so that people have access to some history, to some good teaching, to in a professional way. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I've wanted to do something like this for a while. And when I saw that infographic, I was like, yeah, I'm going to share this infographic. It's awesome. It tells the history. And then Steven was like, I don't know if this is true, Forrest. And then I went, what? There's a guy who knows? I'll ask him.
Yeah, pretty much any time there's an infographic, you should probably ignore it because that's making something black and white that's going to be gray. Evolution takes time, and it's homogenization all the time. And, putting hard dates on things is generally pretty hard to do with the exception of something like, say, Lindy Hop. Obviously, that didn't exist until Lindy Hop the Atlantic.
Right.
And what we do is we trace how things evolved as far as the frequency and the usage of a term and such through multiple sources over the years and such. So it's much more gray because there needs to be momentum behind evolution. But avoid infographics. They're the devil.
Damn, see, I don't know. I'm going to make a new infographic. I'm going to put the things that have a historic hard fast date in black, and then I'm going to put everything else in gray. How's that?
Yes.
And then it'll be
gray. I like that.
It'll be signed by you at the bottom, Forrest approved.
Yes.
Out of curiosity, who else is running around doing this stuff?
Okay, well, there's Peter Loggins over there in Sweden now. Lance Benishek, Minneapolis, Minnesota. For Carolina Shag, Lance, myself, and John Hook John Hook has definitely got the most in-depth collection in the world for Carolina Shag evolution. When we talk about Carolina Shag real quick, there are multiple systems of Carolina Shag evolution. What we do today is based upon competitive styles from the 70s, and really Charlie and Jackie ushered in that era. The styles were danced a little bit differently, especially pre-World War II. So we talk about that. They had a fast and slow style called Little Apple and called fast dancing or just Shag. That existed before that time. Me and Lance are specialists in that. John specializes specifically more so in the later era stuff. He's the guy, no doubt. He has an entire storage unit full of documentation. See, we've got Richard Powers. He teaches at UCLA, I believe, or not UCLA, Berkeley. Stanford University. Yeah, Stanford. And he's a professor there. He teaches historical dancing. He's got probably the largest collection in the world as far as actual primary sources go. Great guy. We trade. Let's see. If you wanted to get more into the academic side, there is a complete subculture known as the vintage dance subculture. They kind of use a different name, if you will. But they specifically deal with everything pretty much 1920s and earlier. After that, myself, Peter Loggins, Richard Powers to an extent, but really myself, Peter Loggins, and Lance Benishek kind of have taken up the guard of the later period stuff. Unfortunately, there's not more of us. There are people that kind of dabble in history, a lot of them, and that's great because it helps. And I've got a bunch of friends that dabble, and they find new documents that none of us have, too. They find new videos and such, and they share them with me, and that's fantastic. The more hands on deck, the better.
But you guys are the primary crazy people for this stuff.
Yeah, there's fortunately not many of us. But I would say also that I'm planning on doing a digital library this year, starting a digital library for researchers and historians. It would be, of course, a closed group because of copyright, but it will allow me to share my collection online so that future researchers and historians will have the ability to learn from my many years of research instantly by accessing my collection.
That's incredible. And so tell me stuff about like you personally, like what's, if you had to pick a favorite dance, what would it be? You can pick multiple, because I'll answer that question with, and I'll answer it with 2 or 3 answers, and I'll qualify them. But just make it fun. If you had to pick a dance, just for yourself, as a dancer, as a dance teacher, you're gonna go to the studio, you're gonna go out this month. What fires up Forrest?
I couldn't because they bring different feelings. If I want to feel something,
yeah.
beautiful,
So give me 3, and then defend your choices.
All right, there we go. That's a much closer example. I don't know. I think I like the. I like to fuse a lot of international rumba bolero, if you will. I like that. I like to soften it, and that's one of my favorite things to do for melodic music and such. It allows me to dance in a spot but still be beautiful. I also still dance a lot of waltz and such. Again, if I want to progress in the song, I just want to flow. I love the feeling of just flowing and moving instead of being on a spot.
You're down to one more. Choose wisely.
Gosh, no. I need 2 more. Can you get 2 more?
Of course. You're giving me an hour of your time. You can get 2 more.
I like, if you will, swing, hustle, Lindy stuff as well. Anything that's got that breakaway style, elongated movements. I love that. I love all tempo ranges of that.
And so in your terminology, breakaway style is like one hand swing hold, that style.
Yeah, that's breakaway position, So like whether I'm dancing to older music or pop music or whatever, I just adapt the form.
So if I adopt a Forrest term and a more historically correct term, that one-handed position is a breakaway position.
Yeah, that's the breakaway.
Because it used to be a closed hold deal, the traditional hand hold, and now I've opened up to free up myself and my partner and our footwork, and I've broken away, and that's
where you get the term say push break, because you're pushing your partner to a breakaway.
Ah.
A sugar push. You're doing a sugar foot into a push break.
Oh, well, look at that. So that's why those 2 terms kind of coexist, because they're really...
Exactly. Whether you sugar foot or don't sugar foot is the difference between a push break and a sugar push.
And show me the sugar foot. What's the difference between
the sugar foot is your swiveling.
Okay.
So like the swivel.
So technically that's the sugar push.
Right. If I did a swivel into that forward and back to my triple,
That's
I
your
sugar footed it. So it's a sugar push versus
Okay.
if I just walked forward straight.
So technically there is no sugar push in West Coast swing for the most part, unless I'm styling it.
Right. That's the one to decide style, or you decide to leave that switching action
That's
swivel.
super fantastic. Oh, sorry, I cut you off. What's the fourth dance? Did we pick a fourth dance?
Oh, okay.
Because you put
I guess
three into that last category.
last thing I would go with probably I love the complexity of Argentine tango.
Oh, interesting.
I just it allows me to do things. It brings new concepts in. You know, your colgadas, your volcadas, you know, your ganchos and ganches, paradas. There's just unique concepts that it brings to the fold that don't exist in other systems. Each system has that, and that's why it's kind of impossible for me to say that I don't want. That's like taking away my toys. So it's hard to say I don't want that toy anymore.
Right. Yeah, but we got to pack for vacation. You can only take a couple.
I know. I definitely want to take the Argentine tango. I'd want to take, you know, my Lindy Hop based evolutions, all of them. To me, it's just adaptation of style and form to different genres of music. Yeah, I would love to have something like a waltz, something that moves and flows. And I love international rumba and bolero. There's kind of same thing. Again, more of a spot dance and real passionate.
Yeah, I dig it.
That's what I'm taking with me.
Perfect. So you got 4 dances. Each one of them has 4 subcategories. You managed to cobble together 16 dances out of my question, which was, what's your favorite dance?
Shh, don't talk about it. You don't talk about that.
You're a dance historian. You get extra ones.
Leave my kids behind.
Right, yeah, see, if you put it that way, it's terrible. Then I wouldn't make you pick. So what do you do? What's your normal life? You are a dance teacher? Do you have another job?
I'm a dance teacher. That's what I've been doing for a long time now. I pretty much spend my time teaching dance and studying dance and researching. You know, that's it.
Do you travel much, or are you primarily
I don't travel a lot. Actually, when I do travel, it's kind of funny. But I actually like to travel around collections. And if I'm in a different city, usually I'm there collecting resources. So I go to libraries. I have a list of libraries all over the world in different cities, and what books and videos and such are in those cities that I'm going to knock out.
That is killer. That is so cool.
My friends know, like, if I go to New York, I'm going to spend literally from the moment the New York City Library, Jerome Robbins Division at Lincoln Center opens. The second that door opens, I'm standing outside, and I'm usually the last person to leave that building, and that's what I'm going to do all day, and then at night I get to hang out with my friends.
That's fascinating. So it's funny, I can tell you a story, because there's a guy that I met years ago when I was teaching in Germany, and he's a dancer. He's got a regular tech job, and he started in the late 90s coming to America. He found a guidebook of the early American explorers, of which I know none of them, but he's become obsessed to the point that he now takes 6 weeks of vacation a year. He comes to America. He has a truck that he's tricked out to be able to do these treks. He gets his truck in Pittsburgh, and it's all outfitted so he can live off road. It's got cameras and the whole. It looks like a real life MacGyver truck, and he drives it out to wherever he left off last year, following these American explorer trails. And is close to the actual trail, meaning most of it's off-road, almost all of it's off-road. He follows the actual routes of all the American explorers. And so he's been doing this since the late 90s. It kind of reminds me of you. His whole year is prepping for, the time that he can go do his research and see and experience something way deeper than any of us would ever go.
Right, yeah, exactly. So, I kind of have different things, say I'm going to go visit, say, Lance, and we're going to be working on Shag, specifically the styles of Shag that he learned from the original dancers and such. So that's a trip I'm planning, but you see, it's really to go do old dancing. Right. Then, same thing, as far as trips go, that's kind of really what I do is I plan on trying to always make time. If I'm going to be somewhere, say for a dance event, I'm going to, if they have a library, then I'm going to be there an extra 2 days or 3 days at the library.
Wow. So you mentioned something about doing an academic style presentation on this. Like, would you ever be open to doing that? Because I run a swing event here, and my brain's always working at new, cool, crazy ideas.
I think it's very, very important. It's very important because this is the problem, of course, with the internet, is that anybody can say anything. What I do whenever I'm confronted with that is I just say source and cite, because everything I say, I source and cite where I got it from. And that's important, so that it's not just speculation, but rather there's primary or secondary sources from it. You know, you need to be able to say where you got things from. Otherwise, there's no due diligence, and it can't be tracked, and it's just speculation. So that's the academic side. I mean, you really shouldn't take anybody serious if they can't. That's not, I don't mean to be offensive, I just mean that it's not founded on anything.
No, and that's what, like I said, we all do. Like, I'm sure somewhere in my local website I did a history of dances, and I cobbled together a bunch of stuff from websites, and I'd have to go reread it because it was all written like 10 years ago, but like I think I was reasonably close, but with nowhere the depth, and I had no idea if it was right. Like,
right, exactly. So that, you know, and even with myself, you know, I'm constantly learning, constantly researching. And if you would ask me 5 years ago for the complete story of evolution of anything, it's not going to be the same story as today, because I learn. We all do.
Right. That's fascinating. Awesome, man. So thanks so much for making the time. This was, I knew it would be cool, but it was way cooler than even I thought.
Oh, no, my pleasure. It's great to just be out there, being able to share with other people, and hopefully they've got a little bit better perspective on it. And if people have more questions, feel free to fire away. You know, that's what I'm here for. Answer questions as best we can currently. That's all we can do, is the best we've got right now as far as history goes, and I'll give you the best I got.
Cool. And how was, because like I said, I'm not exactly sure the format that this is going to take, if it's going to be a podcast. I mean, you running out buying your camera, I bought this microphone on the internet, like within 5 minutes after talking to you, and you said yes. I text my web guy, and I was like, hey man, I said, I know you do a lot of podcasting. I go, what do I do? He goes, buy this microphone, do it through Skype, record it this way, download it this way. I was like, all right, I'll do it. So 5 minutes after you, I Amazon the mic. So I don't know what this format this is going to take, but my goal, if you're cool with it, is for this to be like, put it on a platform to someone. I'm building a West Coast Swing resource site in terms of teaching, and I mean, I'd like to build it into a legitimate resource site where if there's the history of West Coast Swing contained, like it's like legitimate cited. And again, I'm trying to do it in as much of a modern format, right? Because
right.
I'm not. I love your library story, but I'm not going to the library, right? So
No. I don't expect anybody to do what I do. It's for crazies like me. You know, there's not many of us for a reason, because it's boring.
But if we can put it into, you know, a way that I think this is a fascinating conversation to listen to. I can't wait to show it to my students. You know, it's a fascinating conversation to listen to that someone could, in a modern day way, put their headphones on, listen to this conversation, and get as close as we're going to get without going to the library in every city.
Right. For me, as far as information goes, I think the documentation and such, me being able to share the documents that I talk about, or if somebody has a question about it, me be able to show sources and such, I think that's important. That's accessible for people,
right?
Because it puts weight behind my words. But I also believe that is for the person out there that's looking for depth. And the average person just wants to kind of know what's going on.
Right.
So I think you need to have the Cliff Notes version.
Yep.
And then to have that be valid, you need to also have availability of something with more depth.
Yeah, and I think our chat did a good job in that, in like framing the history and how it might shape the future, and how it's shaping, you know, you and I have been dancing 20, or you a little bit longer, but like 20-ish years, and that's enough time that while we're in the middle of it, we almost don't see the change happening, but it is happening. If you come into dancing now, there's changes happening that you won't realize for 20 years, and so your conversation kind of gives a perspective of what's going on right now by looking at what's happened in the previous 20, 40, 60, 80 years.
Absolutely. You know, like you said, the U.S. Open videos will tell you quite a bit. You can see the evolution for yourself.
Have you ever seen that? Years ago I came across where someone put all of the U.S. Open winning videos in one straight DVD.
Yeah. seen that.
I don't know where that came across, but it was really fascinating because, if you sit down and watch all the, you go on a YouTube dance marathon, right? Or you pull out one of those DVDs and you watch 15 or 20 routines in a row. Like, this allowed you to see where, like, one person would come on the floor, and then after that it would be different. And so, and I don't want to talk. I don't have any knowledge or any sites, but it was fascinating for me to see who I thought made changes. But then when you watch those videos, it's like these winners. After that, there was this influence forever, and then this, winner, and then there was that influence forever. It was really fascinating. I wish I knew where I found it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there were definitely people that shaped the future of the dance. Simple things like, say, Shag getting pulled in, the complexity of the footwork that got carried over from the Shag subculture, crossover happening,
Yeah, so what are your, Forrest's, 3 favorite influences on West Coast swing? Let's say since it gained its name in 662 officially?
Yeah, I mean, that would be, yes, as far as the dance teachers in the area, the LA Basin, coming together and saying, yeah, we're going to call this West Coast now. Yeah.
So what are your 3 favorite influences since then to today?
Easy. That 3 favorite. There we go, because there's more than 3. Hustle. I have to say Hustle we have to respect what Hustle did. Another thing we have to respect, I guess, the raps and complexity of raps and such that came out of Texas. And it's a toss-up, really, between Shag and zouk. But those are the ones that boom, tip of the tongue, that those changed the game.
So we can reframe that in the four main influences.
Yeah, 4 main influences that took it from being Lindy Hop. Because understand, even the term West Coast swing in this manual, they're calling steps Lindy. So they're just talking about the regional style of Lindy, and that's described as well. That's where Eastern and Western. They're describing Eastern U.S., Western U.S. And the same thing with East Coast swing. People say all the time, and every single East Coast swing syllabus says Lindy in it. It's crazy talk. But anyway, that's what changed that, if you will, to me. The big change, of course, slotting is a huge thing. The smoothing out, but then after that, the other systems, Hustle, the stuff coming out of Texas, the complexity of the raps and things from the country and western circuit, and also Carolina Shag, the complexity of the footwork and the together steps and such.
And then zouk.
And then finally zouk, what they brought in from zouk, huge deal there.
There's the infographic. I just made one for you. Oops. Forrest's four favorite influences on West Coast swing: Hustle, country western raps, Shag, and zouk.
Yeah. Which
is interesting because if I look back from my own non-academic, non-historical perspective, but if you asked me, I could, in the time that I've been around and the people that I've paid attention to, I could definitely look at a time where I went, okay, I get where the Mario Rabau whips and raps and stuff out of Texas was an influence. I remember Shag being a main influence and the footwork and such. And then it's undeniable, the zouk influence. I actually...
Brenton Calise, Kyle Red, Sarah Van Drake.
Yeah.
They brought that footwork, man.
Yeah, it was fun. I don't do what you do and learn a ton of new dances. I got a pretty broad... dancing, American rhythm professionally and learning all the ballroom stuff and country and swing and the little bit of salsa and hustle I need to know as a teacher. But I stopped there until a couple years ago when the zouk thing came out. I had a little bit of a Forrest moment and I went out and I was like, let me buy some DVDs from people and let me find who the best people are and let me try to learn and let me travel and find that one guy that's living in Pennsylvania that, went to Brazil and learned zouk and let me take lessons. And it was fascinating to learn that stuff and then to go back and watch some of the West Coast videos and the Jordan Tot stuff and go, holy shit, that's what these guys are calling a syllabus zouk pattern of the silver, the bronze level.
Right.
To us it was this new crazy move, but it was move 5 in the syllabus of these guys.
Exactly. So a lot of times the more the more your vision you see things slightly differently than the other person. It's a little challenging to explain something. It's like trying to explain a different language to someone else.
Right. Yeah, here's language. People are making noises, and you're reading with their mouths, and you're reading their brains. Like, wrap your head around that.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. I'll let you go.
All right.
Thanks,
Have a
Ron.
great day.
Good talking to you. Hey, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. And if you're interested in more, check out my website, westcoastswingonline.com. We'll see you on the dance floor.